When I walked into my family's dinner party that night, my father looked at me with confusion and asked, "Honey, why did you come by taxi? What happened to the Mercedes I just gave you?" I opened my mouth to explain, but my husband jumped in and said loud and proud, "Oh, that car, I gave it to my mother. She needs it more than Aziza does." Everyone went silent, and in that moment, my father did something that changed all of our lives forever. Before I tell you how that night turned into the biggest downfall my husband ever faced, please hit like, subscribe, and tell me where you're watching from. Because what happened next, no one in my family was prepared for. When I opened the heavy mahogany doors of my father's mansion that night, the warmth and light of the house washed over me like I'd stepped into another world, one I wasn't dressed for, one I definitely didn't feel like I belonged in. My coat was soaked through from the rain, my curls clung to my cheeks, and my shoes squished on the marble floor as I walked. Everyone else looked perfect. Everyone except me. The monthly family gathering was already in full swing, crystal chandeliers, glowing jazz humming in the background, relatives in designer clothes drifting around the buffet like they lived in a magazine spread. Rows of luxury cars outside sparkled beneath the driveway lights. Every detail screamed wealth, stability, legacy. And then there was me, the only daughter of Thaddeus King, arriving in an Uber, rain-drenched, holding my purse like a lifeline. My husband didn't even bother to come outside to walk me in. When I stepped into the main hall, the first voice I heard wasn't "Welcome home," or "We missed you," or even "Are you okay?" It was my father's deep, steady voice echoing across the dining room. "Aziza," he said, eyebrows lifting. "Why did you come by taxi? What happened to the Mercedes I gave you?" His tone wasn't angry, just surprised, confused, concerned. Before I could even open my mouth to explain, before I could even think of what lie might sound the least humiliating, my husband spoke over me. Loudly, proudly, like he was announcing something he'd accomplished. "I gave it to my mother, Romello," said, leaning back in his chair with a mouthful of food, his tone dripping with arrogance. "She needs it more." The room went silent. Forks froze midair. Conversation halted like someone had cut the power. I stood there, still dripping rainwater on the marble floor, staring at him while he casually wiped his fingers on a linen napkin, completely unfazed by what he'd just admitted, completely oblivious to the humiliation burning under my skin. He didn't stop there. He never did. "It didn't make sense for Aziza to keep such an expensive car," he said, waving his hand dismissively. "She only works in an office. My mother goes to a church club full of wealthy women. They judge. You know how it is." He shrugged like he was explaining the weather. "Besides, using Uber keeps her humble. Parking that car was too stressful anyway." That was the moment the shame turned into something deeper, something sharper. Because it wasn't just that he gave away my birthday gift. It wasn't just that he made a unilateral decision about a car that wasn't his. It was the way he said it. So casual. So entitled. Like he truly believed that he was doing the world a favor by putting me in my place. My father's expression didn't change much, but I saw it just a flicker, the tightening of his jaw, the narrowing of his eyes. He wasn't angry. He was calculating. Meanwhile, my aunts exchanged looks. My cousins whispered. My mother placed a careful hand on my shoulder, silently asking if I was okay. I forced a smile, even though my stomach felt like it had been punched. "Is that true?" one of my aunts asked, eyes wide. Romello didn't hesitate. "Of course. My mother deserves luxury more than anyone. And Aziza, well, she's fine with Uber. She's simple." He stabbed another forkful of roast beef and shoved it into his mouth like the conversation bored him. I lowered my gaze, cheeks burning. I wasn't ashamed of being simple, but he said it like an insult. like a fact, like something he had the right to define. My father slowly set down his glass of wine. The gesture was quiet but heavy with meaning. The kind of gesture that made an entire room subconsciously straighten. Then he leaned back in his chair and said very softly, "I see." His voice was calm, but it chilled the air. He nodded once. "Thank you, Romello, for your honesty." Romello smiled an awful smug smile. He truly thought he had won something. That he had impressed my father with his logic, his generosity, his twisted idea of responsibility. He had no idea he'd just lit the match that would burn his life down. And my father didn't yell, didn't lecture, didn't scold. He simply reached for his phone, typed something, and slid it back into his pocket like he'd just sent an ordinary message. I knew better. That tiny action was the equivalent of a nuclear button. My father was the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar corporation. He never did anything without intent. And I saw that intent flicker in his eyes as he looked at me. Not anger. Not disappointment. Something else. Protection. Quiet. Deadly. The rest of dinner carried on like normal, at least on the surface. People went back to eating. The musicians resumed their set. My father poured himself another cup of coffee. And through it all, Romello leaned in his chair, legs crossed, looking proud of himself, as if he'd made some brilliant executive decision. I stood beside my mother, still trying to steady my breath, still clutching my purse in both hands, like if I let go, I'd fall apart in front of everyone. My father's gaze met mine from across the table. He gave me the tiniest nod. A promise. A warning. A storm. Whatever it was, it sent a shiver up my spine. Because even though Romello kept eating, kept smiling, kept boasting, I knew something he didn't. I knew exactly what that nod meant. My father wasn't done. Not even close. And the quietest man in the room was about to destroy my husband's world piece by piece, without raising his voice once. When my father asked that simple question why I arrived by taxi instead of the Mercedes he'd gifted me just last week, I felt every muscle in my body lock. It was such a harmless question, but the truth behind it was anything but harmless. And before I could say a single word, before I could even swallow the embarrassment burning the back of my throat, Romello answered for me. Like he always did. I gave it to my mother. She needs it more. The room went silent. I felt dozens of eyes slide toward me, then toward him, then back to me, searching, measuring, judging. And in the middle of all that suffocating stillness, my father smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. It wasn't a soft smile. No, it was the smile he used when someone thought they were outsmarting him. I'd seen that smile melt grown men in boardrooms. But Romello didn't recognize it. Of course he didn't. He was too busy chewing grilled salmon like a man who believed he belonged at that table. I should have spoken then. I should have said the truth that he never asked me, that I found out he took the car only when I walked outside our apartment this morning and saw the empty parking spot that he'd left me to take an Uber through a thunderstorm while he strutted into the family dinner warm, dry, and perfectly unbothered. But after 3 years of marriage, I'd learned something painful when I defended myself. He turned it into a fight. When I stayed quiet, he humiliated himself just fine. So I sat there and watched him talk about me like I wasn't even in the room. Aziz's job is just desk work, he continued, shrugging. It's better she stays humble. My mother is the one who needs to look presentable when she goes out. My jaw clenched so tight I thought my teeth might crack. Desk work. Stay humble. Presentable. Every word was a slap one I'd grown too familiar with. My father's fingers tapped once on the tablecloth. A slow, steady rhythm. The only sign he was angry. I felt the air tighten around us as if the room itself was listening. Finally he said, "So that's why my daughter arrived drenched with mud on her shoes." Romello didn't even look ashamed. He nodded, wiped crumbs off his lips, and said, "Exactly, sir. It's just more practical." Practical. I wanted to laugh. Or scream. Or both. But Father simply leaned back in his chair, studying him with the quiet patience of a lion, deciding whether the thing in front of him was even worth killing. And then, in the calmest voice imaginable, he said, "Thank you, son. That explains everything." My heart dropped. That was the sentence. The one every child of my father knew. The one that meant the storm had already begun. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. But it meant something was about to change. Permanently. The dinner continued. Cousins whispered behind napkins. Aunties exchanged looks full of judgment and disbelief. And through it all, Romello relaxed deeper into his chair, thinking he had won something. I forced myself to eat a few bites, even though nothing tasted like anything. My heart hammered against my ribs. My palms were slick. It wasn't fear, no. It was the quiet dread of watching a bridge burn slowly, knowing the fire was deserved, but still feeling the heat. After dessert, Father stood and walked toward the balcony, phone in hand. I knew that walk, that stance, that silence. My stomach tightened. I followed him outside, leaving Romello bragging about some fictional business deal to my uncles. The humid night air wrapped around us. Father typed something on his phone, fast, precise, deliberate. A single message. Then he turned to me. "Did you know about the car?" he asked. I swallowed. "I found out this morning. I didn't want to bring it up here." "Why didn't you call me?" I stared at the tiles beneath my feet. "Because I didn't want to disappoint you. Because I didn't want you to think I'd chosen wrong. Because I thought I could fix it. Because I was ashamed." But all I managed was it wasn't worth ruining the evening. Father nodded, the faintest trace of sadness in his eyes. "You're my daughter," he said quietly. "Anything that hurts you is worth addressing." My chest tightened. For a moment, I felt like I was 7 again, scraping my knee on the driveway and running to him for comfort. "But you didn't confront him," I whispered. "Why?" "Because," my father replied, slipping his phone into his jacket. "I don't raise my voice at children who misbehave." I blinked. "Children," he placed a hand on my shoulder. "A man with integrity returns what is not his. A child takes whatever he can grab and hopes no one notices." The meaning hit me like a bolt of lightning, spreading warmth and fear across my skin. "What did you send?" I asked. His expression didn't change. "A message. To everyone who needs to receive it." The sliding door opened behind us. Romello poked his head out, smiling lazily. "Babe, dessert's starting." "Your father and I were talking, but I guess he wanted you, Father," smiled that same cold smile. "Come inside," he said. "The evening is about to get interesting." And for the first time since arriving, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Hope. Dangerous, soft, trembling hope. The kind that told me the balance was shifting. And Romello had no idea the ground beneath him was already cracking. I watched my father from across the dinner table as he lifted his coffee cup like nothing unusual had happened, like my husband hadn't just admitted in front of our entire family that he gave away the Mercedes my father bought me and handed it to his mother without even asking me. My heart was still pounding inside my chest, my clothes damp from the rain I'd walked through my hair, sticking to my neck because I couldn't even afford to wait inside the Uber after paying cash for the ride. Everyone else in the room was frozen in that uncomfortable silence that fills a place when someone says something so ridiculous that no one knows how to react. But my father, he only gave a soft, almost amused exhale. He nodded as if Romello had just confessed something insightful instead of insulting. "Thank you, son," he said calmly. "I appreciate your honesty." Romello leaned back in his chair, smug, wiping his mouth with a linen napkin like he'd just won a debate. "Of course. I always keep it real, Pops. Pops. I closed my eyes for a second because Romello never called my father that. He never used any nickname for him unless he wanted something. And tonight, clearly he thought he'd secured some kind of victory. My father didn't look at me right away. He simply pulled out his phone, typed something with slow precision, and slid it back into his pocket. No yelling, no anger. Just that quiet, eerie calm that I grew up knowing meant a storm was silently forming. I swallowed hard because I recognized that calm too well. Everyone else resumed talking awkward small talk about the food, the house renovations, the weather, anything to avoid the tension still tangled between us. Romello kept eating like he hadn't embarrassed me in front of the entire King family. I sat there silently trying to make sense of how we ended up in this place. A week ago, I had the keys to that Mercedes. A week ago, his mother had praised me for being such a supportive wife. A week ago, Romello promised things would get better. But tonight I walked through a thunderstorm to a family dinner while he drove a company car and pretended everything was normal. And the worst part, he didn't even stand up to greet me when I walked in dripping wet. My father eventually leaned back in his chair, looked at me with a calm warmth only a parent can have, and asked softly, "You okay, sweetheart?" I nodded, though the tightness in my chest made it hard to breathe. He gave a single tap to the table with his finger just once. No one noticed except me. It was a signal. Something was already in motion. Romello was busy laughing at a joke one of my uncles made completely unaware. My father stood up a few minutes later. "I'm stepping out to make a call," he said casually. No one questioned it. He walked through the double doors that led to his office, leaving me alone with the knot growing in my stomach. I knew exactly what he'd triggered. I just didn't know how far he would take it. When he returned, he looked at me first. Not at Romello. Not at anyone else. Just at me. His eyes said, "I've got you." Something inside me loosened a little, something I'd been carrying for months, maybe even years. Dinner resumed as if nothing happened, but my focus drifted to the steady ticking of the large mahogany clock on the wall. The sound felt louder than usual, like it was counting down to some unseen event. When dessert trays were being brought out, my father cleared his throat lightly. "Aziza," he said, "you'll ride home with me tonight." Romello looked up confused. "Why we came together?" My father tilted his head. "Did you?" Romello blinked, caught off guard. "We're not exactly together, but she arrived by Uber," my father said simply. "So tonight she goes home with me." There was no anger in his tone, but the authority in his voice made the room stop again. A few relatives exchanged glances, sensing tension, but keeping their mouths shut. My cheeks burned, but not from embarrassment, more from the strange mix of shame and relief pouring through me. Relief because my father cared enough to confront the disrespect. Shame because I had allowed it to continue for so long. Romello forced a smile, trying to play it cool. "That's fine, Pops. I gotta go check on some things anyway. Important stuff at the office." My father nodded once. "Good. Then walk her to my car before you go." That was the first moment Romello's confidence cracked. His left eyebrow twitched, barely noticeable unless you knew him well. He wasn't used to being told what to do, not by me, not by anyone, especially not in front of an audience. "Sure," he muttered. "No problem." But for the rest of dinner, he didn't look at me. Not once. When the evening finally wrapped, my father stood ready to leave. Romello reluctantly got up, grabbing his jacket. As we stepped outside, my father's luxury SUV pulled to the front. My father opened the passenger door for me, a gesture he hadn't done since I was a teenager. Romello forced a laugh. "Man, you spoil her too much." My father didn't even blink. "And you don't spoil her enough." My father looked straight at Romello as he said it, not shouting, not threatening, just stating a truth so sharp it cut through the night air. Romello tried to smile again but couldn't hold it. "I take good care of her," he muttered. My father leaned slightly forward. "Then let's hope you start acting like it." And that was when Romello's phone buzzed. The moment he looked at the screen, his face changed. Completely. His confident expression melted into confusion, then fear, then something close to panic. I didn't know what message he'd just received, but I knew it was connected to whatever my father triggered earlier. And I felt it in my bones. This was only the beginning. When my father's message went out, I didn't know exactly what he planned, but I recognized the look in his eyes. It was the same expression he had the day he shut down a corrupt regional manager, the same quiet intensity right before he fired a CFO who tampered with company funds. Whenever he didn't yell, whenever he stayed calm, someone's life was about to fall apart. And that person this time was going to be Romello, or more precisely, his mother. But I didn't know yet how brutal it would be. While I stayed at the family gathering, trying to pretend everything was normal, my phone buzzed with group chat messages from the women in my father's social circle. Photos popped up Corinne at the luxury mall. The same mall she bragged about wanting to make a grand entrance in someday. And apparently today was the day she chose to debut her new baby, my Mercedes. Except, of course, it wasn't hers. It wasn't even Romello's. It was mine. And beyond that, it was technically a corporate vehicle, assigned to me, registered to my father's company, under a security protocol that could be activated at any time. But Corinne didn't know that. And oh, she was performing. One woman sent a photo of Corinne stepping out of the Mercedes like she was an A-list celebrity on a red carpet. She had her sunglasses on despite being indoors. She posed with one hand on the hood as though she owned a dealership. Another woman wrote "Lord" she parked diagonally across 2 spaces so no one would scratch it. I pinched the bridge of my nose. "That sounds like her," I whispered. I didn't hate Corinne, but I did resent her. She made me feel small every chance she had. She once told me I was lucky her son married me as though he'd upgraded my entire bloodline. She pretended I wasn't the one paying most of our bills. And right now, she was parading around a car she ripped out of my hands without so much as asking. My father stood beside me on the balcony of the family room watching the party below. "She's at the mall," he said without looking at me. "How do you know?" "Because security just triggered the protocol." I turned to him. "Dad, what did you do?" He sipped his espresso. "Nothing harmful. But people who disrespect what they don't own must learn the difference between privilege and entitlement." My stomach flipped. Daddy glanced at me, raising a brow. "Relax, sweetheart. This is a lesson, not a war. And unlike your husband or his mother, we don't lie or steal." Something about the calmness of his tone made my heart race. My father was the kindest man I knew unless someone messed with his child. Meanwhile, at the mall, though I didn't witness it myself, I could imagine exactly how it unfolded based on the dozens of texts I received. Corinne stood by the car like she was hosting a press conference. Her church friends surrounded her, all wide-eyed and impressed, though secretly judging her, because many of them knew her background. She said it was purchased cash. One woman texted me, "Cash," as if that woman has ever even touched real money. I rubbed my temples. "Of course," she bragged. "Of course," she inflated the story. Someone else messaged she's telling everyone Romello is moving up in the corporate ranks. "I thought he worked under your dad." "He did," I replied. Past tense. Back at the gathering, I watched Romello laugh loudly at a joke someone cracked. He wasn't thinking about me at all. He hadn't even asked how I arrived. He hadn't offered me a seat, a drink, or even a glance. And my father saw it too. For a moment I wondered if Dad's reaction was too harsh. But then I remembered Romello gave away my birthday gift within 7 days without telling me. I inhaled deeply. No, my father was right. A line had been crossed. Just then, my aunt rushed toward me with her phone open. "Aziza, look at this." A video played Corinne, showing off her car like it was her firstborn child. The camera zoomed in on her bragging about heated leather seats and custom rims. "You see this?" she said in the video. "My son knows how to take care of his mother. Some people's daughters don't even appreciate him the way they should." I exhaled sharply. Of course she said that. Dad walked by just in time to hear that last part. He paused, head tilted. "Is that Liv?" "No." "Recorded maybe 5 minutes ago." He nodded. "Perfect timing." A booming laugh echoed from downstairs. Romello again. He was retelling some story about car management while flexing his watch, the one I bought. He kept bragging about how a man should provide, yet I knew every bill in our household had my name on it. And that's when I understood something painful. My marriage was built on a lie I willingly ignored. I told myself Romello was just proud, or misguided, or insecure. But in truth, he was selfish and comfortable letting me carry him. He saw my father's generosity as his own status symbol. He saw my hard work as something to exploit. And he saw my silence as permission. I didn't realize tears had welled in my eyes until my father put a gentle hand on my shoulder. "Aziza," he said softly, "don't cry. Not in this house. Not because of those people." I sniffed and wiped my eyes. I don't know how it got this bad." "It got this bad," my father said, "because you care, and they don't." I leaned into him, grateful beyond words. He kissed the top of my head. "Dinner will be ready soon. Go sit with your mother. I'll handle everything else." My stomach tightened. "Dad, what exactly is happening at the mall right now?" He smiled, not warm but knowing. "A truth everyone needs to see." Just then, my phone buzzed again. It was a voice message from a woman I barely knew. I pressed play. In the background, alarms blared. A woman shrieked. People gasped and laughed. Then the voice GIRLYUSTLOCKEDTHISLADYINSIDE. It's like the vehicle is possessed. She looks like she's melting mascara everywhere. It's a whole scene. And before the message ended, I heard one last thing, a computerized voice repeating unauthorized user detected. Security protocol active. Please remain seated. I covered my mouth, half horrified, half stunned. Dad, what did you do? When my father excused himself from the dinner table with that calm, unreadable smile, I should have known something was coming. He was the type of man who never raised his voice, never slammed a door, never argued, not because he was gentle, but because he didn't need to. Power was a language he didn't speak. He radiated it. And Romello, blinded by his own arrogance, never understood that. I sat there quietly, pretending to stir my soup, while inside I felt a storm building. My husband had just told a room full of my family, my wealthy, influential family, that he gave my birthday Mercedes to his mother. Not asked, not consulted, not apologized. Just announced it like I was a child who didn't deserve nice things. I should snapped. I should have confronted him right there. But I didn't. I remembered who my father was and what happened to people who disrespected his daughter. So I waited. 10 minutes later, while the guests continued chatting, my father returned to the table as if nothing had happened. He sat down, offered me a small smile, and tapped his phone once. Just once, to confirm something with his security team. Nobody noticed. Not even Romello. But I felt it like a shift in the weather. The first rumble before lightning. We finished the meal. Dessert was served. People laughed, congratulated one another, took photos near the fountain. And while all of that unfolded somewhere in the city, my father's systems were already tracking the Mercedes locking its engine, preparing the asset recovery protocol he personally designed to prevent corporate theft. Romello, of course, remained blissfully unaware. While I helped my aunt arrange the dessert trays, he strolled around like he owned the place, laughing too loudly, chewing with his mouth open, telling the male cousins exaggerated stories about his business victories. Victories that my father funded. Victories that were not victories at all, but loans and opportunities given only because he married me. And still, he acted like my family was lucky to have him. I tried to hide my annoyance, but my father saw it. He always did. "Aziza," he whispered to me as he passed by, "don't worry. Everything will balance out." The way he said it sent chills down my spine. Because in my family, balance out didn't mean karma. It meant consequences. Not long after dessert, my phone buzzed. A notification from the company's system appeared automatically, something I usually ignored since it wasn't my department. But this time, the notification was tagged with my father's name. Asset Recovery Activated Unit 543S Unit 543S, the Mercedes. I nearly let out a gasp. My father didn't even bother hiding it. He wanted me to see it. He wanted me to know he was taking action not for revenge, but for my dignity. I excused myself silently and stepped onto the balcony just to breathe. The cool night air hit my face as relief washed over me. I didn't want Romello punished, but I wanted him humbled. I wanted him to finally be forced to see the line he had crossed. Inside the ballroom, my husband kept bragging. My mom always dreamed of driving a luxury car, he told my cousins. I upgraded her life. My wife doesn't need fancy things, she has everything here. I pressed my hands against the marble railing, trying not to scream. My father approached me once more, calm and composed. "The lesson has begun," he said softly. "But I need you to stay out of the way." "Dad, are you angry?" "No," he replied, smiling faintly. "Anger is a waste of my time." But disrespect, his smile faded. "That gets handled." A shiver crawled down my spine. Because in that moment, I realized something: the game had already started, and my husband was walking right into it. Meanwhile, across town, completely unaware, my mother-in-law Corinne had parked the Mercedes in front of a luxury mall and was bragging like she invented the concept of wealth. She even angled the car sideways so people would notice it. I wasn't there to see it, but I imagined her posing by the hood, waving at her church friends. "My son gave me this car, $150,000 paid in cash." My father would choke laughing. But that was Corinne, always exaggerating, always pretending to be richer than she was. She loved appearances more than truth. She loved status more than her own son. And she loved making me feel like I didn't belong. Perfect prey for my father's system. I sipped a glass of water, trying to stay composed while watching the family mingle inside. I felt my stomach tighten, not from fear, but anticipation. The moment of truth was inching closer, and none of them knew, not Romello, not Corinne, not the cousins laughing at his terrible jokes. Only me and my father. "Aziza," he said, placing a hand on my shoulder, "remember something. What he exposed himself today," my father said, eyes sharp. "All I'm doing is turning on the light." I swallowed hard, knowing exactly what he meant. In our family, exposure was the worst punishment. We didn't ruin people, we simply let them ruin themselves publicly. And for the first time in our marriage, I didn't feel guilty. I didn't feel conflicted. I didn't feel like I had to protect Romello anymore. He chose this. He dug this hole. I was simply stepping aside, letting gravity do the rest. From the corner of my eye, I saw Romello waving for me to join him. His face, bright, proud. Utterly unaware that half the guests were staring at him differently now, whispering about the Uber, about the missing Mercedes, about the way he talked down to me. His carelessness was catching up to him, and he couldn't outrun it this time, because my father was the one tightening the noose. Little did Romello know his humiliation had only just begun. When the security lock finally clicked open and the Mercedes door popped outward, I could still hear Corinne screaming. Her voice was hoarse, panicked, humiliatingly human. The crowd outside had grown women clutching shopping bags, teenagers filming on their phones, mall security trying and failing to calm the chaos. I watched from the mezzanine balcony, above half hidden behind a glass railing, my heart pounding with a strange mixture of dread and inevitability. This was the moment I knew my father had planned. Not out of pettiness, not out of cruelty, but because my father, Thaddeus King, never let arrogance walk away unpunished. And Corinne, my mother-in-law, had built an entire personality out of it. Two of my father's uniformed recovery staff stepped forward, their posture cold and professional. They weren't here to negotiate comfort or explain. They were here to reclaim what belonged to the King enterprise. "Ma'am, please exit the vehicle," one of them said, his voice clear enough for every bystander to hear. Corinne clung to the steering wheel like a child clinging to their last toy. "I'm not moving. This is my car. My son bought it for me." The guard didn't even blink. "This Mercedes is registered under King Operations Fleet. Your usage has been flagged as unauthorized. We have orders to repossess the vehicle immediately." Laughter rippled through the crowd. Not cruel laughter, just the kind people can't help when reality shatters a lie. They didn't know they were watching. Corinne's hands trembled as she screamed, "You're lying, my son paid for this." "He paid cash," another murmur swept through the onlookers. I could see the truth clicking into place in their minds. Her son was not rich. Her son was not successful. Her son lived on my father's payroll. And everything she'd built her image around was borrowed from us. The gods began unhooking her fingers from the wheel one by one. She kicked. She slapped. She begged. Her makeup streaked in black rivers down her cheeks, mixing with sweat and humidity. It would have been heartbreaking if she hadn't spent years belittling me, criticizing everything I did, and molding Romello into a reflection of her own greed. When they finally pulled her from the driver's seat, the crowd gasped. She stumbled out her designer shoes, slipping on the wet pavement. The humiliation was complete and public. The guards loaded the Mercedes onto the tow truck, bright orange and stamped with the King Enterprises emblem. Corinne ran after it, pounding her fists on the side of the truck. "Give it back, GIVE, a CKROME, LOB. UGHT, THA, a TFORME. Guard spoke deliberately loud. "Ma'am, please step back. You are interfering with a corporate repossession order." People were filming. Lots of them. One woman whispered to her friend, "Wasn't she bragging this morning that her son bought her that car?" Another replied, "Guess not." "That's a company vehicle." Yikes. Corinne's face twisted with rage and humiliation. She reached for her purse. The one she bragged was worth $1,000, and in her panic, everything spilled out: drugstore lipstick, cheap perfume, wrinkled coupons, a crumpled church bulletin. No luxury, no status, just the truth exposed under fluorescent lights. Tears blurred my vision, not from pity, but from the weight of everything I had swallowed these past 3 years. The criticism, the condescension, the endless feeling that no matter what I did, I would never be enough for Romello's mother. My phone buzzed. A text from my father. "It has begun. Come home." I took a slow breath, wiped my face, and turned away from the spectacle below. This wasn't revenge. This was justice. And justice was far from over. By the time I reached the car waiting outside my father's chauffeur standing by the rear door, the video of Corinne's meltdown was already circulating online. I didn't need to watch it. I had seen enough in person. The ride back to the estate was quiet. Rain streaked the tinted windows. My mind churned with what the evening still held. My father was never impulsive. His actions were precise, surgical, strategic. If he repossessed the car, it meant the plan was already unfolding in full. When the chauffeur opened the door at the mansion, I stepped out into warm golden lights and the scent of rain-dampened stone. Inside, my family continued the dinner, as if nothing unusual had happened. That was the king way calm at the surface thunder underneath. My father caught my eye from across the room, and with the slightest tilt of his head signaled that everything was under control. But Romello, my husband, had no idea the storm waiting for him. Not yet. I slid back into my chair as quietly as possible, smoothing my damp dress, lowering my gaze. My heart beat quick, anticipating the explosion that was coming. 20 minutes later, right on cue, Romello's phone rang. Loud. Urgent. He answered it at the table without excusing himself, as usual. And that was the moment the night split open. Corinne's shrill screams blasted through the speaker, echoing across the dining hall. Romello's face drained of color within seconds. The whole family heard her describing everything being locked in the car, the alarm, the tow truck, the guards, the humiliation. And for the first time, I saw fear creep into Romello's eyes. Not concern for his mother, but fear of what it meant for him. Because he knew. Deep down, what my father had done was only the beginning. He slammed the phone down so hard the silverware rattled and spun toward me with a rage that burned hot and wild. WHEDID. Why, he screamed, pointing at me like a prosecutor accusing a criminal. YOUDIDTIS. Oi. Everyone stared, and slowly, very slowly, my father rose from his chair. When my father's estate manager opened the double doors to the dining hall and announced that my husband's phone was ringing, I didn't think anything of it at first. Romello had been bragging loudly all evening, bragging about his Mercedes, bragging about his new position in my father's company, bragging about his growing influence. He loved these gatherings because he believed they revolved around him. He believed he was impressing everyone. He didn't notice the tight smiles. He didn't see the way my father's cousins exchanged glances filled with pity for me. He didn't see me sitting quietly at the far edge of the table, exhausted from the rain, my hair still damp, my Uber receipt still in my purse. But he heard that phone ring. He pulled it out with the dramatic flourish that only a man who thinks he's the center of the universe would ever do. He beamed at me as if expecting praise. "It's my mom," he declared loudly, announcing it to the whole table like it was breaking news. "Probably calling to tell me how much she loves the car." I looked down at my teacup, silently bracing myself. Something in my chest squeezed tight. I didn't know what was coming, but I knew it wouldn't be good. He answered the phone on speaker because of course he did. Romello never missed a chance to make a performance out of anything. "Hey, Ma," he said, leaning back smugly in his chair so everyone could hear. "How's the ride? Smooth, right? That's luxury for you." What followed was chaos. His mother's shrill voice blasted out of the phone like a siren, raw and cracked from crying. "THEYTO, okay THECAR, she screamed. Every conversation in the room stopped on a dime. Chairs scraped. Forks froze midair. THEYTO, okay ITTHEYEEA Romello sat up fast, the grin falling off his face.
What do you mean they took it? Who took it? YURFATINLA WSPLE.
She wailed. MENFROMKINGENTE. Around us, my uncles whispered. My aunts covered their mouths. My cousins leaned forward, eyes gleaming with the kind of fascination people get when a mask finally slips off. My father sat perfectly still, stirring his tea slowly, as if this call were nothing more than a weather report. But Romello wasn't looking at them. He was glaring straight at me. Aziza, he snapped, slamming his palm onto the table so hard the silverware jumped. What did you do? My throat tightened. What do you mean, don't play dumb? He shouted, rising to his feet, the veins in his neck bulging. You did something. You humiliated my mother. You called security, didn't you? You sabotaged the car. That car wasn't yours, I said softly. It wasn't even mine. It belonged to the company. Gasps rippled around the table. Romello jabbed a finger at me, shaking with rage. You think you can disrespect MY family? You think you can take back gifts I gave you? Think you can enough? My father's voice cut through the room like a blade. Everyone fell silent instantly. Even the chandeliers seemed to stop vibrating. My father rose from his seat with the calm, slow authority of a man who never needed to raise his voice to control a room. He stepped toward Romello with deliberate ease, stopping just 2 feet away. Son, he said, each word dipped in cold steel, sit down. Romello's mouth opened, but whatever he intended to say died on his tongue. He sat, not because he wanted to, but because my father's presence pressed him into the chair. My father folded his hands behind his back. There is no issue with the car, he said matter-of-factly. It was retrieved because the company detected unauthorized use. A routine protocol. Romello blinked, confused. My father continued, and since I heard your mother is currently on foot in the rain, perhaps you should go to her. A good son would help her. Don't you think? Romello straightened, desperate to regain control. I can't, he stammered. I still need to go back to the office tonight. My father cut him off with a single raised hand. No, you do not. Because as of 5 p.m. today, you no longer work for my company. A silence so deep fell over the room that I could hear my own heartbeat. My father extended his hand, palm open. Keys. Romello's face drained of all color. Well, what keys? My father tilted his head faintly. The keys to the sedan you've been using. A company vehicle. A benefit for employees. Romello swallowed hard. He looked around for sympathy. None came. He slowly reached into his pocket and placed the keys into my father's open hand. My father then did something that made every cousin, aunt, uncle, and me freeze. He pulled a crisp $50 bill from his wallet, folded it neatly, and slipped it into Romello's shirt pocket. Then he patted the pocket twice. For your taxi ride home, he said softly. Uber is far too extravagant for the humble lifestyle you said my daughter should live. 2 of my father's security guards stepped forward, standing behind Romello with the unmoving solidity of mountains. Romello looked at me one last time. In that glance I saw desperation, entitlement, disbelief, all wrapped in one. He wanted me to save him, to speak, to soften my father, to make everything go back to the way he preferred him, taking me shrinking. I turned away. I lifted my teacup and took a slow, quiet sip. Romello stood, and for the first time since I'd known him, he had to leave a room without dignity, without a car, without a title, without control. The double doors closed behind him with a final hollow thud. It sounded exactly like the end of something. Maybe everything. When the alarms finally stopped ringing inside my chest, I realized I had been standing there watching my mother-in-law's humiliation unfold like it was a movie playing in slow motion. I didn't plan any of it. I didn't want to hurt her, even after all the snide comments, the backhanded compliments, the constant reminders that I wasn't good enough for her precious son. But when I saw the Mercedes, my Mercedes sitting crooked across 2V, IP parking spots at the luxury mall, I felt something cold slide down my spine. It wasn't anger. It was clarity. a sharp, sudden awareness that people like Corinne and Romello only understood one language: consequence. And today my father had decided to speak that language fluently. I watched the scene play out through the tinted windows of the cafe across from the entrance. Corinne strutted toward the car like it was a throne waiting for its queen. She didn't even break stride as she tossed her shopping bags into the backseat, designer logos flashing everywhere, all bought with money that wasn't hers. She had no idea the system had already locked her in its crosshairs. The moment she pressed the ignition button, the car didn't start. Instead, the headlights flashed violently, the horn blared like a siren, and a robotic voice echoed through the entire parking structure: unauthorized user detected. Security protocol activated. Vehicle immobilized. People stopped walking. Heads turned. And then when Corinne tried to open the door and realized she was trapped inside, the panic took over. She started banging on the windows, screaming for help, her voice muffled behind the thick glass of the luxury cabin. Mascara streaks ran down her face. Her perfect blowout stuck to her forehead with sweat. For the first time since I met her, she didn't look wealthy or powerful or intimidating. She looked scared and very, very small. I sipped my chai latte slowly, letting the warmth press into my hands as I watched her thrash inside the car. I knew what my father had done. The asset recovery protocol he'd activated earlier wasn't a threat. It was a silent storm. It targeted company vehicles being misused, and since Romello had illegally registered my Mercedes under Corinne's name, without permission, the system had flagged it immediately. My car wasn't stolen. It was reclaiming itself. 3 minutes later, exactly 3, her door locks clicked open. The garage doors slid open and a bright orange King Enterprises tow truck rolled inside. 2 uniformed men stepped out. They didn't shout. They didn't smirk. They didn't even look surprised. They just approached the car with professional calm. "Mom," the taller one said, "please step out of the vehicle." Corinne stumbled out like a wild animal escaping captivity. Her wig, yes, she wore a wig today, was slightly crooked. Her shoes slipped on the pavement, and she had to grab the side mirror to steady herself. "What is the meaning of this?" she screeched. "This is my car. My son bought this for me." "Mom," the second guard replied, "this vehicle is registered to King Enterprises. You are not an authorized driver." "That's a lie!" she shrieked. "Romello bought it cash. Do you hear me, cash?" The first guard tapped his tablet. "Mom, the purchase order, insurance profile, and security tag all confirm this car belongs to Mr. Thaddeus King's corporate fleet. You are listed as a violator of asset policy. The vehicle must be repossessed immediately." Her friends, who had gathered around by now, gasped so loudly I could hear it across the garage. One of them whispered so she wasn't telling the truth. Another muttered, "I knew she couldn't afford that car." And another, louder than the rest, said, "Does this mean she lied about the country club fees too?" Corinne's face cracked. Not physically, emotionally. The collapse was visible, like a porcelain vase finally showing the fractures after years of pressure. And then she did something I didn't expect. She begged. "Please don't do this," she cried, grabbing the sleeve of the guard. "People are watching. Please. I can explain. My son works for the company. It's a misunderstanding." The guard pulled his arm away gently, not unkindly. "I'm sorry, ma'am. This is an authorized operation. Step back." When she didn't, the guards did what they had to. They peeled her hands off the car. It wasn't violent. It wasn't cruel. But it was firm. She stumbled backward, landing on her shopping bags. One burst open, spilling cheap-looking trinkets and clearance items onto the concrete. The crowd's silence twisted into laughter, not loud, not mocking, but cutting. The kind of laughter people use when they realize someone they envied was never worth envying at all. The tow truck lifted the Mercedes effortlessly, metal chains clinking like a final judgment. Corinne ran after it, screaming Romello's name, but the truck disappeared up the ramp. And she stood there, rain starting to fall, in thin, cold sheets, looking like the world had dropped her in the gutter and forgotten her. And that's when I stood up from my table. I didn't rush toward her. I didn't comfort her. I didn't even feel satisfaction. I felt clarity again. This wasn't revenge. This was consequence. She had taken what wasn't hers openly, arrogantly, and she had been corrected. My phone buzzed. A message from Dad. Asset secured. Time to come home. I slipped the phone into my purse and walked toward the exit heels, clicking softly on the marble floor. Behind me, Corinne collapsed to her knees in the rain, sobbing. Her friends walked away one by one, pretending not to know her. As I stepped into my ride, one of the company sous vide, warm and waiting, I whispered to myself, "This is only the beginning." The iron gates slammed shut behind me with a finality that felt like judgment. I stood there outside the King estate, soaked, shaking, and stripped of every illusion of superiority I had carried into that lunch. Within minutes, I had gone from a man who strutted through marble floors to someone shoved into the rain like trash left at the curb. My clothes clung to me heavy with water. My expensive silk shirt, bought with Aziz's supplemental card, was now translucent, plastered to my skin like a sad joke. My loafers squelched with every step as I walked down the long driveway that separated privilege from punishment. For years, I walked this path with pride, head high, chest, out convinced the world owed me everything because I had married into wealth. Now each step felt like the earth reminding me who I truly was without the safety of Aziz's name. The rain came harder, drumming against me like an accusation. I kept my head down, one hand shielding my face, the other gripping my phone as I frantically opened the rideshare app. The dreaded message appeared immediately: no drivers available. Restricted access zone. I cursed under my breath, swiping, refreshing, switching apps, anything. Nothing worked. I tried calling the security booth. The call didn't even ring. They had blocked my number. My jaw clenched. I began the long walk to the neighborhood gate, 1.5 miles in the storm. Every puddle, every gust of cold wind, every car passing by, splashing water, felt like a punishment carved specifically for me. My gelled hair collapsed against my forehead, dripping into my eyes. My breath shook. My pride burned. And beneath all of that, a quiet realization nobody was coming to help me. The driveway curved left, and for a moment I saw the estate through the trees, warm lights glowing through the windows, silhouettes of people continuing the evening like nothing had happened, like I had never mattered. My stomach twisted. I lost track of time as I trudged through the storm, each step heavier than the last. When I finally reached the gate, I felt like my bones were waterlogged. I leaned against the cold metal bars, trying to catch my breath. The world blurred through sheets of rain. That was when I noticed headlights approaching from behind. I turned, heart pounding, hoping that maybe, just maybe, Aziza had begged her father to bring me back inside. Maybe she missed me. Maybe she still loved me. A white Pearl SUV glided down the driveway, elegant and impossibly smooth, the kind of car that made people step aside. The kind of car that belonged in the King family. My pulse quickened. I straightened my soaked shirt, wiped my face, pushed my hair back, ready to be forgiven. As the SUV approached, I saw them clearly. Mr. King. Calm, dignified, one hand on the wheel, posture perfect. And beside him, my wife, Aziza. Dry, warm, beautiful. Wrapped in a soft shawl, holding a thermos between her hands, her expression serene. Not a trace of distress, not a flicker of worry about me. I stepped toward the road, instinctively raising my hand just slightly, subtle enough to look humble, desperate enough to be noticed. I searched Aziza's face, waiting for her to meet my eyes, waiting for her to see her husband, soaked, shivering, humiliated, waiting for her to say something, anything. The moment stretched. I held my breath. Aziza finally looked my way, but not at me. Through me. Past me. As if I were nothing more than an inconvenient mailbox at the side of the road. No anger. No pity. No softness. Just cold indifference. And then Mr. King accelerated. The SUV sped through a deep puddle beside the curb. Dirty water splashed up my legs, across my clothes, onto my face. I didn't even flinch. I just stood there, drenched, watching the red taillights blur through the storm as the car disappeared onto the main road, carrying the life I had once treated like a given, a life I no longer had any right to. For a long moment I didn't move. My skin was freezing. My chest tightened. But the real pain was internal. A dull, crushing weight that pressed against my ribs until I felt hollow. The kind of hurt you only feel when you finally understand you've been replaced, not with anger, but with indifference. Aziza wasn't punishing me. She was done with me. Truly done. The realization struck harder than the rain. I tried to swallow, but my throat ached. I wiped my cheek, unsure if it was water or tears. Probably both. Eventually, I forced myself to turn away from the road and begin the long walk toward town. Each step was slower than the last. My legs trembled. My hands shook. I was cold down to the bone. My pride, what remained of it, crumbled with every breath. Tonight I had been stripped of wealth, status, dignity, and the illusion that I mattered. But the worst part wasn't losing the car, or the job, or the respect. The worst part was realizing that Aziza had looked at me, her husband, and felt nothing. That silence cut deeper than anything Mr. King could have said or done. And as I walked through the downpour, head bowed, soaked and trembling, only one truth repeated in my mind like a cruel mantra: I had become invisible. And invisibility was the harshest punishment of all. When the heavy iron gate shut behind Romello, with that metallic echo, part of me felt the air shift like something poisonous had finally left the property. But I didn't celebrate. I didn't smile. I simply turned back to the family room, poured myself a cup of warm tea, and let the quiet dignity of the moment wrap around me like a soft blanket. My father, Mr. King, sat beside me with his usual calm authority, completely unfazed by the storm he had just unleashed. "Are you all right, Princess?" he asked gently. I nodded. "I'm more than all right, Dad." And I was. For the first time in years, I felt air filling my lungs properly. Not weighted with guilt. Not filtered through Romello's needs. Not drenched in pressure. Just air. Clean, refreshing mine. We continued our family dinner as if nothing had happened. Plates were passed, conversations resumed, laughter bubbled across the table. Only one seat remained empty, Romello's. And no one missed him. Later that evening, I excused myself and quietly walked upstairs to my old bedroom. I hadn't planned to stay overnight, but something about the warmth of the house, the safety, made me linger. I sat on the old velvet bench beneath my window and exhaled slowly, letting my shoulders drop from a tension I didn't even realize I was carrying. For years I had shrunk myself to fit the tiny box Romello built for me. Tonight, I stepped out of it. I wrapped my arms around myself gently. Not out of fear, out of recognition. I was here, still standing, stronger than ever. A soft knock on my door pulled me from my thoughts. My father stepped inside, hands folded behind him. "You handled yourself with grace tonight," he said. "I'm proud of you." His words landed in a place inside me that had been neglected for too long. "Thank you, Dad," I whispered. "I don't know why I tolerated so much." "I do," he said warmly. "You loved him. And good-hearted people often assume others are good-hearted too." I shrugged. eyes drifting out the window into the stormy night. Rain still fell steadily, blurring the garden lights. He used that love, I murmured, over and over again. My father walked toward the small table and picked up the envelope I'd left there earlier, the one containing my salary slips, bank receipts, and a trail of financial evidence showing just how much Romello had drained from my accounts. "We'll address all of it," Dad said, "but not today. Tonight, you rest." For the first time, I didn't argue. I lay down in my childhood bed, wrapped myself in the thick duvet, and let the world finally quiet around me. I didn't know what Romello was doing at that moment, whether he was screaming in the rain, punching the air, cursing me to his mother. None of that mattered. Not anymore. I fell asleep peacefully, and for the first time in a very long time, I didn't dream of escape. I dreamed of possibility. The next morning, sunlight poured through my curtains like liquid gold. The storm had passed. The sky was clear, brilliant, fresh. I stretched slowly, my muscles still sore from stress, but lighter. Much lighter. When I went downstairs, my father was already seated at the breakfast bar, flipping through a stack of documents. "Morning," I said, pouring myself coffee. "Morning, princess." "Hungry, starving," I admitted. "I haven't eaten properly in days." Dad motioned for the chef, who immediately brought out warm pastries, fresh fruit, and scrambled eggs. I sat beside him, savoring the comfort. "There's something you should know," Dad said calmly. "Romello tried to check into the company garage around 3 a.m. I blinked. "For what, to steal something?" "No," Dad replied. "He thought he could talk his way back inside." A humorless laugh escaped my chest. "He still thinks charm will fix everything." "Charm only works when you haven't been exposed," my father said simply. And last night exposed him to the bones. I sipped my coffee, letting the bitterness settle on my tongue. "What did security say? They turned him away." "Permanently. His ID card is deactivated. He's locked out of the entire enterprise." I nodded quietly. A small ache fluttered in my chest, not for him but for the version of myself that once would have felt sorry. That version was dead now. "Today," Dad continued, "I'd like you to visit the office with me. We need your signature on a few documents." "Related to the car?" I asked. "Related to everything," he'd clarified. My phone buzzed. A text from Romello. The first since he'd been kicked out. "We need to talk. Please answer." I turned my phone face down. My father noticed. "You don't owe that man a single moment of your attention," he said gently. "I know. And if he shows up here again, security will handle it." "I know." But the truth was, part of me expected him to show up sooner or later. Not because he loved me, but because he needed me. Needed my money, my father's influence, my stability, my name. Today, for the first time, I felt no desire to save him. At 10 a.m., we drove to King Enterprises. I sat in Dad's passenger seat, calm and composed, as the building towers rose before us like polished steel mountains. Employees nodded respectfully as we walked through the lobby. In the executive boardroom, several senior managers stood waiting with folders. They greeted me warmly. Dad gestured for me to sit. "Aziza," he said gently, "these documents update all privileges, accounts, and authorizations that were previously entangled with your husband." I nodded, flipping through papers. "We're ensuring he can't access a single asset linked to the company," Dad added. "What about the credit cards?" I asked. "Frozen. Joint account locked. Your funds moved to a private vault." "The insurance he tried to add his mother to," I asked coldly. Dad's smile was razor sharp. "Denied." I initialed each page with steady hands. With every signature, the chains loosened. With every document, I reclaimed pieces of myself I didn't even know I'd handed away. When we finished, Dad walked me to the balcony overlooking the city. "Proud of you," he said again. "You're handling this with a strength most people don't have." I inhaled deeply, feeling the wind brush my cheeks. "I'm ready now," I murmured. "Ready for all of it." My father nodded. "Then tomorrow," he said, "we begin the divorce." I walked into the courtroom feeling lighter than I had felt in months. Not because I wanted revenge, not because I wanted to see Romello crushed, but because for the first time, I finally felt like my voice mattered. My truth mattered, and I wasn't going to let him twist it anymore. Romello was already there, sitting beside his budget attorney in a wrinkled suit that used to fit him before months of stress and unemployment deflated his shoulders. He tried to look noble, sad eyes, slumped posture, hands clasped like he was the victim of some dreadful injustice. His mother Corinne sat behind him in the audience, wearing clothing 2 sizes too big cheap fabric clinging awkwardly to her. Her face was swollen from crying, and her eyes had the wild, frantic look of someone who knows her world is collapsing and still refuses to admit why. When I walked in, Romello's head snapped up. For a split second, I saw hope, real naive hope, flash in his eyes. I guess he genuinely believed I'd walk over, hug him, and beg the court to show mercy. But I didn't stop. I walked right past him and took my seat beside my attorneys, 3 of them sharp suits, confident posture, immaculate folders. A team that didn't just defend me, but believed in me. Romello's expression cracked. His lips twitched into a pout of betrayal, like I was the one who ruined his life, as if taking my car, my finances, my dignity for years wasn't enough. He truly expected me to save him now. The judge entered. We all rose. And when we sat back down, the case began. His lawyer stood first, clearing his throat dramatically. "Your Honor, my client has endured significant emotional distress. His wife abandoned him, orchestrated the repossession of his mother's vehicle, and used her financial advantage to humiliate and punish him. We request a fair division of assets accumulated during the marriage, as well as spousal support due to the imbalance of income." I stared at the back of Romello's head. I couldn't believe it. This man, who never paid a single bill, who used my salary like his personal inheritance, who treated my gifts as stepping stools for his ego, actually wanted Emmy to support HIM. The judge nodded at my attorney. "Your response, my lead counsel." Mariah stood up slowly. "Calm, unbothered, deadly. Your Honor, we do not wish to argue emotion. We argue evidence." She opened a binder so thick it could have broken a toe if it dropped. "These are all financial records from the past 3 years of marriage. Bank statements, credit card transactions, text messages authorizing or denying purchases, emails regarding household budgets. Every cent can be accounted for. And out of approximately $350,000 of discretionary spending, she placed a thick stack of highlighted pages on the wooden table. Mr. Romello Harrison contributed exactly 0. A low murmur traveled through the courtroom. Corinne stiffened. Romello's face flushed scarlet. Mariah continued. "Furthermore, we present documentation proving that the Mercedes involved in the earlier incident was and always has been property of King Enterprises, not Mr. Harrison. It was assigned temporarily to my client by her father, the CEO. Mr. Harrison had no authority whatsoever to transfer ownership to a third party, let alone his mother." The judge flipped through the documents, expression tightening. I watched Romello. Sweat gathered at his hairline. His breathing grew uneven. His attorney visibly panicked, flipping through his notes for any kind of lifeline, but there wasn't one. Not against facts. Not against numbers. Not against truth. "Your Honor," Mariah said, voice steady, "we are filing a countersuit for misappropriation of company property, unauthorized use of funds, financial abuse, and the total repayment of all expenses charged to the plaintiff without consent." Romello's jaw dropped open. Corinne let out a choked gasp. The judge looked at him over her glasses. Mr. Harrison, is there any legitimate evidence that you financially contributed to your household? His lawyer whispered frantically, but Romello slapped his hand away and stood up, voice cracking. I provided emotional support. I gave her love. I kept the house together. The judge raised a hand. Sit down. Emotional contributions do not replace $300,000. He sank into his chair as if his bones had melted. I could almost see the reality slam into him, the first real responsibility he'd had to face in years. Mariah continued calmly. We also present proof that Mr. Harrison attempted to pursue assets belonging to my client's father under false pretenses. He repeatedly claimed ownership of properties he never worked for and never paid for. And lastly, she placed the final document before the judge. We submit a psychological evaluation of Mrs. Aziza Harrison, confirming that she suffered prolonged emotional manipulation and financial suppression during the marriage. The judge didn't take long. The gavel struck the desk like thunder. Divorce granted. The court denies Mr. Harrison's request for shared assets or spousal support. Additionally, Mr. Harrison is ordered to repay $298,000 in unauthorized financial use to Mrs. Harrison effective immediately. His mother's property acquired through misuse of corporate funds will be seized and liquidated. Corinne screamed. Actually screamed. Loud, feral, almost animalistic. She collapsed in her chair, clutching her chest as officers rushed in. Romello didn't move. Not even when they announced the seizure of his mother's house. Not even when his lawyer quietly packed his briefcase and slipped away ashamed. He just stared at me, eyes empty, mouth trembling, like he finally understood that there was no one left to blame, no one left to save him, and that the only person who ever loved him was the one he tried to break. I stood up, smoothed my dress, walked out of the courtroom without looking back. Not because I hated him, not because I wanted him to suffer, but because I finally grasped the truth. I owed him nothing, not my tears, not my pity, not my anger. Nothing. For the first time in years, I stepped outside and felt the sun warming my skin like a promise. A promise that my life was finally irrevocably mine. 5 years have passed, and sometimes I still can't believe how far away that old version of my life feels. Back then, I couldn't see anything clearly through the fog of humiliation, exhaustion, and misplaced loyalty. Now, I look at everything with a clarity I earned painfully, slowly, and with scars that remind me I survived a world that tried to convince me my worth depended on someone else. I remember the morning I saw Romello for the last time, like it's carved into stone. The court hall smelled like old paper and lemon disinfectant. My heels clicked softly on the polished floor as I walked toward the courtroom doors, my lawyers flanking me, my files neatly organized, evidence stacked like bricks in the foundation of a new life I was about to reclaim. And there he was, sitting on the wooden bench outside Shoulders, slumped suit, wrinkled shoes, dull. He used to walk into rooms with swagger, like every eye should adore him. Now he sat, like a man waiting for a bus, in the rain, a hollowed version of himself, sunken, defeated, angry at gravity for pulling him down where he once believed he'd never fall. He looked up, and his eyes met mine. For a second, just a second, I saw the hope. That tiny spark, he still carried the belief that I would save him. Again. The same belief he used to trap me, manipulate me, guilt me. The belief that I would be soft, that I would be foolish, that I would fold. Aziza, he whispered, standing up too quickly. Baby, just talk to me. We don't need all this. His voice trembled, and for years that tremble would have broken me. But not anymore. I walked past him as if he were a shadow on the ground. Not an enemy. Not a lover. Just a shadow. And when the judge read the verdict, denying every demand he made, holding him accountable for every penny he stole, every lie he told, every benefit he abused I didn't celebrate, I simply exhaled. It felt like releasing a breath I'd been holding since the day I married him. After the ruling, I stepped outside and felt the sunlight on my face. For the first time in forever, I felt it fully warm, honest, unfiltered. Freedom has a temperature. I learned that day. Fast forward to now. It's a quiet Sunday morning, the kind that feels soft around the edges with sunlight slipping gently through the curtains. I'm sitting on the balcony of my home, my real home, the one I bought with my own earnings, my own decisions, my own courage. The garden below is full of roses blooming wild and unapologetic, as if they know the woman who planted them was done shrinking. My husband, my real partner, steps outside with a cup of tea in his hands. The kind of man who doesn't compete with me, but builds with me. The kind who never raises his voice, never belittles, never grabs, never takes anything I don't freely choose to give. "You're up early," he says, smiling as he sets the cup beside me. "You were writing again," I nod. "I've been journaling lately. Not to remember the pain, but to honor the woman who walked through fire and didn't come out burned." He kisses my forehead softly and goes back inside to check on our daughter, whose tiny giggles float into the morning air like wind chimes. Sometimes I wonder how different life would have been if I never left Romello. But the thought lasts only a heartbeat because the answer is always the same. I wouldn't have survived. Not as myself. Not as Aziza. Meanwhile, somewhere far away, Romello wakes up in a room with thin walls and a leaking ceiling. I heard his mother is bedridden now that he visits her sometimes between shifts at the wholesale market. I don't know the details. I don't need to. All I know is every action has a consequence, and life eventually returns everything you give it. One afternoon, while scrolling through the news on my phone, I saw a video clip posted by a local journalist. It was a short interview about small business resilience. And there I was, smiling, confident, speaking about opportunity growth independence. The comments below were filled with positivity people, inspired people, cheering people, rooting for me. Then I saw a lone comment buried beneath the others. Just 3 words. "I miss you." No profile picture, no name, but I knew. I didn't reply. I didn't delete it either. I left it there as a reminder of a life I escaped, a reminder of who I once was and who I refused to die as, a reminder that the universe always keeps its receipts. And on nights when the world grows quiet and my daughter sleeps against my chest, I whisper a promise to myself, a promise I think every woman who survived something like this deserves to make. I will never shrink again. I will never apologize for taking up space. I will never dim my light to keep someone else comfortable. And I will never, ever give away the Mercedes of my life, my worth, my identity, my future to someone who only wants it to polish their own ego. My father once told me a man who sees your value will never ask you to live smaller. I didn't understand what he meant back then, but I understand now. I live it now. And as I sip the warm tea my husband made watching the sunrise paint gold across the garden, I know one thing for certain. I may have lost a car that day, but I found myself, and that was the real gift.